deal? We can't live
Oh,
without
well.
them. I knew I should
Whatever
come up here.
happens,
I'm only 18.
happens.
I don't want to die yet. I've never even been with a woman. Somebody help!
Hey guys, welcome back to the Nerd Guru, and yes, today you probably guessed it, we're going to be talking about one of my absolute favorite animes, maybe favorite TV shows of all time, Cowboy Bebop. The show is absolutely brilliant in my opinion. I think it covers so much. It's part comedy, part sci-fi, part noir, part coming of age in a weird way. It's really about a group of bounty hunters aboard a ship called the Bebop that takes place almost entirely either in space or on a group of several different planets. Did I mention this also is supposed to be set in the future? The show came out in 1998 and the show takes place in the year of 2071. This gives the show a somewhat futuristic vibe. However, though it takes place in space and on several different spaceships, with the science fiction vibe being ever present, there are themes that are evergreen and hold true to today's day and age.
This is ridiculous. What am I doing here?
Do not fear death. Death is always at our side. When we show fear, it jumps at us faster than light. But if we do not show fear, it casts its eye upon us gently, and then guides us into infinity.
Each episode has a similar structure. The crew of the Bebop, intentionally or unintentionally, happen on a bounty. They get information on how to track this aforementioned bounty down through different means of information gathering. Most of the time, the Bebop gang actually discovered that this bounty isn't really all it's cracked up to be. In fact, the show typically uses the original bounty as what's called a MacGuffin, which is an object device or event that is necessary to the plot and the motivation of the characters, but is really insignificant or unimportant to the larger story. The layers of this MacGuffin reveal nuance and instead become vehicles through which one or all of the members of the Bebop process their own past traumas and emotions. It turns out the bounty is just a vehicle through which the characters learn more about themselves. And in the end, the bounty doesn't actually really matter. And because of this, the bounty usually ends up dying or disappearing or ends up just being set free, with some exceptions. And this results in some truly tragic moments in this show.
We'll never get out of here now. I'll never see Mars. Adios.
The Bebop gang are essentially bounty hunters who are out purely to track down this bounty, as usually announced at the beginning of the episode by these two, with the promise of a large reward in the form of wulongs, which is basically money in the Cowboy Bebop universe. Besides all the gunfire and the big explosions in this show, as well as the absolutely amazing space dogfights, which is one of my favorite aspects, it may be one of the most quiet, reflective shows, which is what really drew me in. The show utilizes its quiet moments to really sell the impact of what is actually happening. Yes, there are moments of happiness and levity, but there are also serious dark moments that are accented and capitalized by the quietness in between all of the action. Aside from the quiet is employed by harmonicas and banjos, only further cementing this show's wild western vibe. I would be absolutely remiss as well not to mention the implementation of jazz music. The jazz music underscores almost this entire show, especially more of the action scenes. I just absolutely am obsessed with the juxtaposition of jazz music, which is usually used to calm and soothe, with these big, bombastic action scenes.
You trust your eyes too much, Asimov. You're not a chameleon, you know. You can't see everywhere at once.
The way the show tells a story is actually such a brilliant representation of life and how we as humans go through different moments. The series becomes a metaphysical expression of how people overcome their lives and the lingering grief that comes along with it. The show is not scared to recognize that life is less of a linear path towards a goal and more of a general haze we must venture through, with little or no guidance. The show makes you smile. Like I said, there are happy moments, even absolutely comedic, but it makes you smile to give you a reason to be sad, to really feel the emotions the show is trying to convey. Space is endless and empty, and with this show taking place mostly in space, you get the feeling of just how lonely life can be sometimes. The show was created by a man named Shinichiro Watanabe, who went on to create other incredible shows such as Samurai Champloo and Space Dandy. And Watanabe would become known for his amazing introspective character work. In fact, the character work is what fuels this show and creates somewhat of a serialized non-serialization. In essence, you can jump into the show with any episode and it would still somewhat make sense. However, you would miss out on some rather important details, specifically as it relates to the characters of this show. The show is essentially about the characters and the past that they all might be running from, trying to avoid, or learning to embrace. All the characters have some sort of unresolved past. All the characters need the bounty hunting lifestyle because it allows them to not be alone with their thoughts. Like I said, the characterization in this show is the absolute most important part. Even in episodes that feel like they might be quote-unquote filler episodes, you're still learning about the characters, what makes them tick, what makes them happy, what makes them sad and wistful about the past. Jet Black is the captain and authority figure of the Bebop and an ex-cop. He's stern and straightforward. He's basically the de facto leader of the ship. The ship, or the Bebop, is Jet's, and as such, takes on much of the main responsibilities of the ship. Jet's controlling nature comes out with the crew, which ultimately makes them less responsive to his control. This is evident in his relationship with his ex, Alyssa. When she left him, she felt she lacked independence because of his controlling nature. As an ex-cop, Jet is running from his past. However, he very physically cannot escape it as a result of his lost arm, which is replaced by a cybernetic one. He is often on the ship tending to bonsai plants as a way of using this small thing that he's caring for as a way to healthily exert some of his control. Throughout the show, you can see him grappling with this, how he can control things in a healthy way and how he can control his life. Faye Valentine is carefree and goes with the flow of life, and little is sacred to her. Throughout the show, it feels like Faye isn't fully committed to being with the Bebop crew. As a character, Faye refuses to be tied down to anyone or any place, and often has a fly-by-night attitude toward the rest of the crew. She often leaves the crew and appears very money-oriented. However, there is much more than the surface with Faye. She rarely stays anywhere for too long because she doesn't feel like she quite belongs. It's revealed in the show she was cryogenically frozen after an accident. She remained in stasis for 54 years and being thawed out in a future that she doesn't recognize and doesn't recognize her and has no memory of her past. Radical Edward brings a lot of joy and happiness to the ship and is able to disrupt everyone's more serious state. She's usually the person that Jet, Faye, or Spike go to when they need some tech-based assistance, as that's how they met her. She's a hacker that was born on Earth and can sometimes be seen as one of the most useful members of the crew. Ed's relationship with the past and the present is much less melancholic. Sure, it's maybe because she's younger, but she was abandoned as a child and left to live as an orphan. But Ed doesn't let her history define her present moment, and can sometimes seem like the little sibling of the crew, and is often hanging around Ein, who is the data dog that came to be with the crew after initially being a part of a bounty that they were trying to get. Ein's a corgi that starts as a conquest mission to come stay on the Bebop with the rest of the crew, and ends up going with Ed when she finally decides to leave. Spike Spiegal is a whole can of worms, and honestly, probably my favorite character of the show. He's such a complex character that unravels itself throughout the course of the show. We aren't made completely aware of the inner workings of Spike's mind. At the surface level, Spike is someone who just lives in the moment, seems to not think things through before acting, and seems to just live for the thrill of the hunt of a bounty. However, Spike almost seems like a different person altogether when he's alone. In between bounties, Spike seems so sad. He's lethargic, depressed, and gives off a serious disinterest in everything happening around him. Spike is a man with nothing to lose and aims to fill up this emptiness with high-octane adventures. The show at first makes it seem like he has a death wish, but when faced with his own mortality, he's terrified. His existence relies upon finding near-death experiences to prove to himself he is in fact alive, and not just living in a dream. Spike is running from his past, literally and figuratively. He broke away from a crime syndicate because a woman he loved, but ultimately could never be with.
When I was younger, I wasn't afraid of anything. I didn't have the slightest fear of dying, no reason for it. I thought that if I die, that's fine with me, any time at all. But then I met a certain woman and it changed. I started to think that I wanted to survive. For the first time, the idea of death began to scare me. It was on my mind. I'd never felt that kind of feeling. Almost paralyzed.
And where is she now?
She faded off somewhere.
The show is absolutely excellent in my opinion, and possibly the reason why I keep returning to it and watching it over and over again is because these themes are universal. Regardless of what you're going through, the past is the past, the future is the future, but all we have is right now. And it feels like what Shinichiro Watanabe is trying to tell us, to live in the moment, love the now, because we can't live in the past. It's impossible. And the future is an ever-flowing concept, constantly ahead of us. So no use in endlessly obsessing over it.
Well, whatever happens, happens.
Thanks so much for watching, you guys. I absolutely love this show, and I really strongly suggest giving it a watch. It's one of my favorites of all time, and I notice something different every single time I watch the show. If you made it this far, please do me a big favor in subscribing to the channel, liking, and please drop down below in the comments and let me know what show changed you fundamentally that you still return to this day. And until next time, I'll see you, and I love y'all so much. Bye-bye.